Independence Day in the United States is right around the corner, which means picnics, parades, and pyrotechnics on July 2nd. I mean, July 4th. I'm not the only person who's made that mistake. The second president, John Adams, thought July 2nd would be our national day of celebration. Since he was there, maybe he had a point. I'm Bob Summers, and this is a presidential story. A year into the Second Continental Congress, on June 7, 1776, Virginia delegate Richard Henry Lee introduced the Lee Resolution, which was seconded by Massachusetts delegate John Adams. This resolution was made up of 3 parts. The first part was to declare independence from England. The second was to establish a plan for ensuring American foreign relations. And the third was to prepare a plan for the Confederation of the States. Congress decided to tackle these 3 parts separately. On June 10th, Congress decided that committees would be formed to address each of these 3 elements of the resolution in case the resolutions passed. On the question of independence, Congress established what became known as the Committee of 5 to draft a document explaining to the public the reasons for their decision. This document became the Declaration of Independence. The Committee of 5 was composed of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert R. Livingston, although most of the initial writing was from Jefferson. On July 2, 1776, Congress voted on this short statement in the Lee Resolution for Independence, declaring that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved. In Philadelphia's Independence Hall, 12 of the 13 colonies approved the resolution on July 2nd. New York delegates abstained because the New York Provincial Congress was in recess and had not provided their guidance to the delegates on how to vote. When they reconvened on July 9th, 1 week later, New York officially affirmed the declaration, making the vote unanimous. The Lee Resolution was reported in newspapers at the time as the colony's definitive declaration of independence from Great Britain. On the same day, July 2nd, 1776, the Pennsylvania Evening Post reported, "This day the Continental Congress declared the United Colonies free and independent states." A similar headline ran in the Pennsylvania Gazette on the next day. On July 3rd, John Adams wrote a letter to his wife Abigail with the exciting news. The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn act of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shoes,
Real big show,
games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward, forevermore. Well, Adams at least had the celebration part right, even if the date didn't stick. After the Second Continental Congress passed the Lee Resolution, they took on the task of explaining their decision to the public with the draft document from the Committee of 5. After a couple of days of debate and a number of edits to the text, including the addition of some of Lee's words at the end, the final text of the Declaration of Independence was approved by Congress on July 4th and sent to a local printer named John Dunlap. About 200 copies of the Dunlap broadside version of the Declaration were printed, with President of the Continental Congress John Hancock's name printed, not signed, at the bottom, and the date the document was approved, July 4th, 1776, emblazoned on the top. Only 26 known copies of these broadsides remain today. Artist John Trumbull's most famous painting, Declaration of Independence, which has hung in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol since 1826, has led people to believe that this moment, on July 4th, was the moment all the delegates signed the Declaration of Independence. In fact, the painting is meant to show the moment the Committee of 5 delivered their draft to Congress. In reality, it wasn't until August 2nd that most of the members of Congress signed the document, starting with John Hancock. It took the rest of the year to get all the members to sign as they arrived back in Philadelphia. There was no official signing ceremony. The Independence Day celebrations Adams predicted and that we enjoy today didn't materialize at first. Most members of Congress in early July 1777 hadn't even remembered it had been a year. When they did remember on July 3rd, they decided July 4th seemed to make sense for the celebration. After all, that is the date on the Declaration of Independence, and it stuck. Which day do you think makes sense? July 2nd, when the Lee Resolution was adopted and independence was declared, or July 4th, the date on the official Declaration of Independence document enumerating the reasons the colonies split from England? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.